Most people think that you need a plan to start a business. Well, for me, there was no plan. I realized one night that I had no other choice. It was an epiphany. And this epiphany really started when I was 13 years old. The night I had the epiphany, I was 25 years old. And I'm going to describe to you the journey I took from 13 years old. And while you're listening to this journey, hopefully it'll explain to you or help you understand the building blocks that I took to be able to start my own business. And I'm hoping that that's going to help you in figuring out what you need to do to start your own business. So when I was 13 years old, me and my brother started a little business to mow yards. And we built that little yard business up. I think we had about 20 different yards. And each one of those yards on a weekly basis was, I think we were making an average of $2 to $3 per yard. And we even had some that would pay us $5 or $6. So we really thought, man, that was great. Those were much bigger yards, but we were super excited about that. In running that little business, I learned about expenses, the cost of running a business versus what you're selling it for. I learned about maintenance of your equipment and how important that was. I learned about dealing with customers and collecting, how important that was to collect, because sometimes people didn't pay us. And that was, I realized, to start getting paid immediately after we did the yard. And the other thing that we learned mowing those yards was how fun it was to make money, And I'll never forget the night that I'd accumulated my first $100 in my life. And it was a bunch of $1 bills and $5 bills, and those all added up to $100. And I thought, wow, I was rich. Well, the next part of this journey was when I turned 16, I wanted a real job, right? So there was a grocery store in town. It was a little chain. They had 3 grocery stores, and they had an opening there for a bagger of groceries. And I was so excited to have my first job, my first real job with had a time card where I checked in each day, and then I got a paycheck, and then taxes were actually taken out of the paycheck. And I started off at minimum wage. I think it was $2.25 an hour or something like that. Started off as a bagger. I learned that if I gave great service in bagging the groceries, that I'd get tips. So that was a great little lesson. And I learned how, by working really hard, I was the hardest worker in that store. And by working harder than everybody else, I had an opportunity to get promoted. The managers really liked that. So I was promoted to running a dairy, the dairy part of the business. And man, did I learn a lot there. I learned about inventory control. I had a lot of inventory that went bad because I ordered wrong. And I got scolded a little bit, but they let me get through that. And what a great learning lesson on inventory. And after, I think about a year and a half, that company had an opening for an assistant manager. And there was a couple assistant managers at the store, basically a day assistant manager and a night assistant manager. There might have been 3, but I think there was just 2. But anyway, there was an assistant manager that opened up, and I applied for that job, and I got that job at 17 years old. And I had about 50 employees reporting to me. So hard work got me to that position, but I didn't really know how to manage employees. And so I watched the other managers and tried to figure out how to do it. And I did okay, but my hormones got the better of me. As I got a little power being an assistant manager, I started dating a lot of the young girls that worked there, and I was dating all kinds of them and creating all kinds of drama and all kinds of problems. And the owner of the store brought me in one night and said, hey, you just created too many problems for the company. We're going to let you go. So man, I was shocked that I was let go, but then I realized later why. That you really don't date your employees and have that type of situation as a manager. It's not good. So the next job I took, there was a opening at a Popeyes chicken, and I had management experience, and they were advertising for an assistant manager. So I took that job at the Popeyes. They hired me almost the first day because they were very impressed at 17 that I was assistant manager at a grocery store. And so they hired me, and I worked my ass off at that Popeyes. And I learned so many things there. Learned about cooking chicken, about inventory control. I learned about customer service. I learned it was my first lesson about focus and how powerful, that Popeyes was just selling chicken versus what McDonald's and every other franchise was doing. A lot of the hamburger franchises and whatnot in town, a lot of the other restaurants. But that Popeyes was just backed up with people, in lines trying to get that chicken. It was a very focused company. So my first lesson in how focusing on one aspect in a restaurant can actually be very profitable. I learned about the founder of Popeyes. At the time, he had started with nothing. He was a very poor guy and started a chicken place and built this Popeyes up to, at the time, in the early 80s, late 70s, I think he had approximately 400 locations. Anyway, it was a great success story, and that was very exciting to me to see that this guy had built himself into a multi-millionaire. And unfortunately at Popeyes, I had it in my mind that everyone in that store, all these minimum wage employees, should work as hard as I did. So I was very, very harsh on the employees. I even cussed at them and yelled at them. I thought that was something that you should do. And one night, I had, I think, a crew of about 7 or 8 employees. Well, they all got together and they walked out. They said they weren't going to work for me. So, my gosh, I managed to go ahead and close that store out. And you got to understand me, that Popeye store was extremely busy, so it was hellacious for me to get that done. And the next morning, the owner and manager of the store was waiting for me, and he sat down and told me, he said, "Frank, you're a hard worker, you really are, but nobody wants to work for you, and I just can't keep you." So I got fired from that job. Second job I had, and second job I got fired. So I thought, my gosh, I've got to do something different. Maybe I need to work for a larger company. Maybe that'll be better for me in some way. So there was a entry-level position, several entry-level positions that were being advertised by a company called Williams in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a very large company, a large energy oil-related, pipeline-related company. They had about 5,000 employees. A very premier company in Tulsa, and I was so excited to get this entry-level job. It was in the print shop. They hired me in the print shop. And I got to work there, and I realized that pretty quickly that to get, to higher pay and up higher within that company to the kind of power that I had, running the Popeyes and running the grocery store. I had, like I said, when I was 17, I had 50 employees reporting to me at the grocery store, and I had probably 20 or 30 employees reporting to me at the Popeyes. So I had a lot of power and I had a lot of control, and I was learning things. Well, when I got in this print shop, I learned how to do this printing really, really quickly, and I became bored real quick. And I wanted to expand, I wanted to grow, I wanted more responsibility, but there was a lot of politics and bureaucracy in that company. And I learned that in order for me to become, really high up in that company, I was going to have a college degree, and I had no college degree. And I got to talking to, the human resources department and other different managers in that company, and realized that I was going to have to either wait and go very, very slowly. At the same time, I was getting my college education, or I was not going to get to the top of that company, because I wanted to be at the top of Williams Brothers. So I was so unhappy there and bored to death that I got fired from that company too. So my third job I got fired from. And I thought, man, I have got to get some discipline here. I definitely need to have a college degree if I'm going to work at one of these big companies. So I enrolled at the University of Tulsa, and I got a college, worked on my college degree there, and ended up graduating there after 4 years. But and the major that I had was management, and I had a minor in finance. And while I was working there, I worked at a gas station and an automotive repair shop. I was kind of a car guy, so I got a little job there working. It gave me some good money to have while I was going to college. And while I was working at that gas station, I learned a lot about, operating a gas station, operating a auto repair shop. And I watched the manager, got to know the owner of the company really well. And I realized that if I wanted to focus, on mechanics, that I could have my own mechanic shop someday, or even having a gas station. He wasn't a super wealthy guy, but he was doing a lot better than even my parents were doing by just owning that one gas station and auto repair shop. So anyway, getting back to college, while I was working at the auto repair shop, I was getting my college degree, and I did pretty good. I wasn't a brilliant student, but I finished with about a 3.7 G or 3.6 GPA, and I took a lot of management and accounting and finance classes. And when my senior year came about, there were several S&P 500 companies that were interviewing on campus. So I thought that I'd done the right thing, got pretty good grades, and I had a work history. And I thought, well, gosh, I'm going to get hired by maybe one of these big, large companies in an entry-level job, or maybe as an intern or something like that. Well, none of them hired me. I mean, none of them hired me. None of them were interested in me. And it was very disappointing, extremely disappointing. So I got back on the thought process of maybe I should start my own business. And I was really into lifting weights at the time, and I loved exercising. And so I thought about starting a gym. It looked like some of these gyms that I was working at around town, I thought that, gosh, I could do that. I saw the owners, and I didn't think they were any smarter than me. And I thought, man, maybe I could start a gym. And I started looking at the cost and what it was going to cost to build a gym. And I had a pretty good relationship with some family members, so I thought maybe I might be able to borrow some money to start a gym, right? But I thought, gosh, I just don't have a good overall knowledge of the gym business. So I thought, man, I'm going to go work for the number one gym in town. There was this gym, kind of like a chain of gyms in town. There were 3 of them. It's called All American. And back then they didn't have any of these big national chains, at least none of them in Tulsa yet, like the Golds or the Bally's and on and on. And so in Tulsa at that time in the, I was approximately I had graduated from college, so I was 22 years old, I believe. 22 or 23 years old. I decided once again that maybe it'd be better for me to work at this All American. So they hired me at All American to work at that company. And I thought by working at All American, maybe I'll get enough experience and knowledge to be able to justify opening my own gym someday. Well, at All American, boy, I realized that they were a sales-oriented and focused company. Not so much a athletic training type or weight training type company. They were a sales-oriented company. And so for me to get anywhere and make any money at that company, I had to learn how to how to sell. And they taught me a lot of things. I learned about acquisition of customers. I learned about how many customers that you've got to call on just to get one sale. And sometimes it was hundreds of people that you had to talk to. And I realized that it was a numbers game, right? And I also learned how to close. There was a lot of, high growth and high performing salespeople in that company. I watched what they did on how to close, and I learned different techniques of closing potential people that were interested in buying a gym package. But another thing that I did while I was working there is I built relationships with some of the customers that would buy gym memberships from me. And that was different than the other salespeople. And the relationships I built were because they wanted to improve their physique and they wanted to look better. So in me selling gym memberships to them, I told them that I would help them. And that started giving me an edge over the other salespeople at the gym at All American. I had such an edge that I became the top salesperson in that company because I not only knew how to sell, how to close, but I also was originating new business because these people that I worked with that got success in working at All American, I helped them build their bodies or get more in shape. By me helping those individuals, they would help me. They would bring and send people to buy memberships from me. And so I was able to beat all the other salespeople at All American because I was doing what I said I was going to do. I was promising to potential people that were interested in a gym membership that I was going to help them actually get performance. But I did get disillusioned by working at that gym. And the disillusionment was this: I did not have a real good understanding of the financial end of the company. And I got a little scared that I might not have enough capital to start a gym and to run it. And because I'd never been in the financial end of any of the companies that I'd worked at, other than back when I was mowing yards, but that really wasn't a great understanding to finance. And there wasn't much capital involved. So I realized that starting a gym, I was going to need a lot more capital. So I decided to quit the gym and try to find some type of a financial related job. And there was this opening at a company called American Canvas in town for a bookkeeper. And I really was attracted to that bookkeeper position because I thought, man, that's going to teach me the final thing that I need to know about running a business. So I started working. They hired me at American Canvas. I started working at that company, and they had a lot of different financial issues and problems, and I learned how to get us through those. I learned that collections was extremely important, and so I spent a lot of time in collecting at that company, and I spent a lot of time with managing cash and dealing with banks. And I tried to do all the accounting myself. I had a little bit of help with taxes, but I really learned the financial and the accounting end of that company. And American Canvas was focused on manufacturing awnings and creating signs, and they sold some supplies to sign companies. So I got to build really great relationships with the vendors. First from the financial end by paying them, but I got to really understand those vendors and how important those vendors and the credit that they gave to American Canvas. That credit that they gave allowed us to be able to do things that we needed to do to grow. The more inventory we got, the more that we could sell. And the more that we didn't have to spend cash on that, because we had terms with those vendors and I could pay those vendors. And while I was working at that company, I worked hard, really, really hard. I worked so hard that the owner of the company wanted to keep me. And so he encouraged me to stay by giving me 10% ownership in the company if I would stay there at least 5 years. So while I was working at that company, I realized that I could do a lot more than just the financial end. And so I had a really good understanding of marketing and sales by working in the previous companies that I work at. And I knew that if I could get in the marketing and sales of American Canvas, I might be able to help increase that sales and drive the profitability up even more, which now that I was an owner, I thought that's going to be better for me, right? And I might be able to increase my compensation. So I got involved in the sales and the marketing end of American Canvas and really helped that company drive its sales up and grow its sales. And while I was working at American Canvas, I worked harder than anybody at that company, and I put in more hours than anybody in that company. I would work 12, 13, 14 hours a day because I was not only working in the sales and marketing, I was also helping out in the production of that company. I understood production. I was doing almost all the purchasing of materials, so I really understood purchasing. And by that time, I'd built up pretty good credit because I was saving all my money from working at the company. And one night I sat there and I realized, my gosh, I've got credit to be able to borrow. I understand the financial end of a company. I understand the sales and marketing end of the company. And this one night I realized that I knew more than the owner of the company. I knew what was driving that company more than the owner of the company. And I was working there more than the owner of the company. And it seemed like I had more drive and more desire to build that company than the owner of the company. So that night, when I thought about it, I thought, you know, the only difference between me and the owner of this company is he had the balls to start the company. So then I reflected back on the Popeyes. I reflected back on the grocery store. I reflected back on the auto repair shop, and I realized none of those owners and managers, they weren't any smarter than me. They didn't know any more than me about running those businesses. They just had the balls to start a company. So, right then, that night, I decided I'm going to start my own business. And instead of helping all these other people build their businesses, I'm going to build my own business.